Awesome. So the recording is started. Thank you for coming, everybody. And let's start with what I have to offer. Let me share my screen first. Yeah. So this slideshow is basically just to maintain a flow of the conversation. So first, I would like to talk about SAML in general. What exactly is SAML when we hear the term SAML? So SAML is nothing but it is a standardized way to tell the external applications and services that a user is who they say are. I mean, I'm just reading through it, but it's actually, this is the simplest way we can explain the SAML. The SAML is it's a markup language that we are using to um, trust the user identity and trust the user that he's actually what he's telling that he is. So when we how SAML works is that there are mainly three parties involved. We have our user who is trying to log into the application. We have our identity provider. So in our case, identity provider could be Okta or Google. So the user is supposed to have an account in any one of these uh, identity providers. And then we have a service provider. So user is trying to access the service provider, GitLab, and GitLab, instead of um authenticating the user again by asking him the details like email, password again, GitLab goes and asks the identity provider that please can you confirm whether the user is the one who is telling, and the identity provider comes up with the response. And this whole cycle this is called single sign-on, and it is happening with the mechanism called SAML. So this is all the SAML authentication process looks like. We have some important terms when it comes to SAML. So we have called a SAML assertion, which is a message that tells the service provider that a user is signed in. Basically, SAML assertion is nothing but a response that identity provider sends to the service provider with in a particular format. It does look like, I think, it looks something like this. So this is an assertion that is sent from the identity provider to the GitLab end with all the information about user, that what is his UID, what is his mail, or whatever we have asked the identity provider to share with us. And that helps us to identify the user. Then there is one more small term called relay state. I just added it there, but it's mainly basically relay state is any attribute, is another attribute in the assertion which can be used. It's an optional attribute, but which can be used by identity provider and service provider to pass any value which is going to be unchanged in this whole SSO cycle. In GitLab's case, we generally use relay state to store the redirect URL. So in case we don't want the user to be redirected to the GitLab after the whole authentication process is completed, we store the redirect URL in relay state. So that's a very, I mean, it's not something that we encounter in day-to-day work. I think very few clients are using relay state, but yeah, it's there. So if you want, we can go ahead with a small SAML demo, or if you have some queries here, we can just answer those.
Smitri,
Yeah.
what would be a scenario where real estate would be used? Like I'm unsure how that would fit into an enterprise. What would they do that for?
So in GitLab, why we are using relay state is we are using relay state to specify the redirect URL. So if you want the user to use the SAML sign on, SAML sign into the GitLab, but get redirected to some other path than the normal sign in path, then we use the relay state. For example, you would want the user to sign into the GitLab but get redirected to a particular group in the GitLab or to a particular project path in the GitLab. You use the relay state to store that URL. You send that
Okay.
information to the IDP while logging in, and then IDP sends that information once the login process, the identity verification is over. It just sends that information back to the GitLab for the GitLab to know that the user needs to be redirected to this URL instead of some standard login URL.
That's excellent. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay, we can quickly just look at. I am using developer Okta account. This is what I use for my day-to-day work with SAML. What I would do is I have already set up one SAML application here, but we can simply follow our documentation and we can set up one SAML account or SAML SSO account with our GitLab account. So now SAML SSO is also it works for .com as well as for self-managed. For .com, you need to do the configurations at the group level. And my locally running instance is of self-managed flavor. So I have, if I just show you, I have the SAML SSO configured on the instance level. So here the user can simply click on the SAML SSO and will be redirected to the Okta account. And there the uh, user can sign into the Okta and Okta will redirect to the GitLab account. So this is how our instance level SAML SSO works. I will show you the how do we get this. Shall we try creating one application and creating one configuration at the instance level together? So we will simply
Yes,
follow
that'd
the
be interesting.
documentation. So first we'll set up the Okta. We need to create an app integration. I am here in Okta. Let's create an app integration. I want a SAML 2.0 application. Let's name it something. It's test SAML demo. Okay, so now this is the URL that where the IDP will redirect will basically this is the URL which IDP will call once the user is verified or not verified with the appropriate response. So in our case, it is when you can see here. So they have given it a very proper way that this is going to be your assertion consumer service URL or single sign-in URL. In my case, this is my local setup. So there goes your domain, your audience URI or the SP. This is your issuer, I suppose. So
This is Google Workspace.
sorry.
Okay.
We have to set up the Okta. We need to use the issuer.
Sort of came up.
Yes, it's written nicely in group SAML. I'm wondering, yeah, we should add a similar kind of a table here. It's better that it will be better. So let's just put some note here. So the attribute statements are important. This is where we basically we can tell Okta if we want some attributes in the response. These are not always required, but this will be required when we have to create a user, for example. So which is your user.email. So we can ask always ask the identity provider to send a few of the users attributes in the response. I think we have it somewhere. I am sorry, I forgot, I missed the link for the documentation. Okay, I will find out the documentation and I will link up with that because but there are few yes, so here it goes. I think so. You can, these are optional, but you can always specify if in case you don't, if you want the IDP to send you this information, and you can always preview the assertion that how your response will look like when from the IDP.
Email is mandatory, right?
Email is mandatory. If you are planning to create a user from the information that is being sent by the IDP, then email is mandatory.
Okay, so the just-in-time sort of creation.
Yes, we can do that. None of these options are actually important, but let's just finish creating the app. So our application is created on the Okta side. Now we have the information that we require to configure to specify a SAML configuration on the GitLab end. We have SAML setup instructions. For Okta, it's very easy. You have a separate SAML setup instruction. They'll tell you that this is the SSO URL that you need to provide. So we can do that. Then there is a cert print. Let us just download the certificate. As you can see, I've already downloaded so many Okta certificates. But we need a SHA-1 version of the .cert file. So this is the command that we can use to get the fingerprint, or people will have different mechanisms. Let us just change the fingerprint here. This is the same standard name identifier format. We are not changing that. And let's see. Our configurations, oh, we'll have to restart.
I must update my GDK. I still got the old status pages.
Updating the GDK is always a risky affair.
Yes.
So this is, I wanted this error to happen because I've created an application, but the application on Okta does not know about any user. So when you're trying to actually sign in via Okta or sign in via SAML, the IDP must know about the user that you're trying to sign in as. So let's just assign a user. I have a few users created on Okta. So I will add this person. Okay, just a second. So at least one user has been assigned. And let's back to site.
So do
Identity linking works here. So let's just Command Z. So when the user tries to when the IDP calls the callback for the GitLab login, this is the class that is executed, Omniauth callbacks controller. We go to the Omniauth flow, and if the user is already logged in, then we just store some basic session imperator information. And see, the first thing we do is we try to link the identity for the user. So if the current user, so what we do is we just check whether if the user is already logged in, then he can have many identities. We check if he already has an identity for the current provider with the extra new ID that has been sent by the provider. This is also something that is sent by the IDP response, the extra new ID. So we just check whether we already have an entry for this user with the current provider. If not, then we go ahead and create a new entry for the current provider. Provider could be SAML, LDP, LDAP, or anything. Then sorry, I got him. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So this is the controller viewer there. Once the identity is linked, we build the auth user in case that he does not exist in our class, in our system. We check. So in our case, it will be, this is the class where we go ahead and build the user. Yes, this is the class. So we just try to find the user if he's there, depending upon the UID and the provider extra UID. If he's not there, then we try to find if the user email is there. If the user email is there, then we auto link. There is a configuration that if the user email is there, whether we should auto link the SAML user with the given provider or not. If that configuration is set at the GitLab site, then otherwise the user is created new. If he don't have permission to auto link the user, then probably we create the new user. The same happens for the LDAP user. If the sign up enable, okay, this is another setting. If we have allow single sign on this setting at our end, for example, let me just show here. These are the few scenarios when the user can be there on the GitLab and user is there on the GitLab, already on the GitLab, user is not on the GitLab, user is there but linked to a different provider. So in all those scenarios, those are all the scenarios that we handle on the user login via SAML SSO. And so this is where the game of identities come in. So just a second, what is happening? Um, so that's a brief about identities. Queries.
Smriti, there are some cases where the SAML identity and the SCIM identity for the same user is different. Like, the customer configured their, like, for example, in the case of Okta, you see there's two apps that are required, right? One is the
Yeah,
Okta SAML app that you create, and then one is the Okta SCIM app that you have to use from the marketplace, right?
yeah,
Now, the marketplace app uses the object ID as the external UID
yes.
for which is SCIM, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, SAML, it uses whatever the customer sets. So if the customer wasn't following our instructions in the docs, and they set something else to be the external UID in the SAML app, then when they configure SCIM, there will be issues, right?
Yes, if the email ID is same, there can be issues because there will not be an issue. If the email ID is same and the user already has an account in GitLab, he will simply be given a new SCIM identity. Um, just a second. So if we are here in the provisioning service, if the user is already there, then we go ahead and create an identity. Yeah, and the identity will be created by the external UID that has been sent as the SCIM response. So if the external UID that there is a difference in external UID in the that has been sent as a SCIM response as well as in the and that has been sent as a SAML response, and there will be two identities created for the same user. Yes.
But then it'll only be the SCIM identity and the SAML identity, and then the SCIM identity will be different from the SAML identity, right?
Yes, SCIM identity will be different than the SAML identity.
Will
But the
SCIM then
user will be same. But the user will be same. So as far as I know, whatever SCIM provisioning issues will, SCIM provisioning updates will happen on the same user. But the user will be logging in with the different SAML identity. And then at any point of time, if we configure SAML group sync, then it might be an issue. Um, I think so. What do you say, Abubakar? Any inputs here?
Yeah, I think it can be an issue, and I mean, but I haven't tested this flow. I think it would be better if you can add this flow in our test case. So, for instance, if we have SCIM and SAML indicated separately, and then they are having different external ID, but they are providing same email address, what should be the behavior? I think I mean, for the GitLab, it will be much harder to distinguish between two users when they have two different external UID, right? Because external UID is a GitLab term for whatever the unique things that is sent by the identity provider. But at least we should have a test suite or test case for this behavior.
Understood.
Yeah, right now, what we do is we say that, our recommendation is, hey, say, for example, a customer is already using Okta, right? And they've got, let's say, 200 users, and they did not follow our instructions to the letter when they were configuring Okta SAML, and now they want to go and configure Okta SCIM. But unfortunately, Okta SCIM only supports object ID as the external UID. You can't change that.
Yes.
So then you have to say to the customer, hey, you can't use if you want to use SCIM with your current setup, you will have to change your Okta app and also update all of the users external the SAML UID, the SAML identity. You'll have to update it to match whatever SCIM is going to send.
That's not the ideal flow, right? I mean, do you have an issue for that open?
I don't think we have an issue because the understanding was that that's kind of from a support perspective. Sorry.
I would suggest
That's
that
the
I
way
mean,
it
and
is,
that,
and it's documented. We document that to update the identity, right?
Yeah, I think we do have documentation around like if the SAML, if the SCIM identity doesn't match, then you either have to change the SCIM application's settings, or if you can't, then you have to update the SAML identities for all the users. But I'm not sure.
how do I to do that for the existing users?
Sorry.
do we have the link to that documentation, Alvin? I think it'll be great to have that handy.
I will look for that. Chris, if you can help me find that as well, or any other
Yeah,
support.
I'm trying to find it.
Sorry, Abu Bakar, what did you ask?
And my question was how to do that. I mean, do we have to write some APIs or run some script on the Rails console or something like that?
Yeah, for GitLab.com customers, we have helped them with an API script
Okay.
where we basically iterated through all the group members and updated their external UIDs to match whatever SCIM's going to make it. Chris has put a link.
That's the API call we reference. I'm just trying to find. I think it's in the troubleshooting section. Traffic mix machine. I think
Oh,
it's
yeah.
this one.
We have an API for updating the external ID, right? We do have, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So, okay, so we have had the issues in past where such a problem happened with that the same user has been configured with different identities.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to be most likely the biggest problem seems to be with customers that use Okta, right? Because there's two
Yes.
separate apps.
Mm-hmm.
And if you and the second app, which is SCIM, is you can't change the external UID's attribute configuration, right? You can't change that it's permanent. So I think that's the big one is
So
customers that use.
basically, if they are okay, so if they are using two apps, one for SCIM and one for SAML, so they need to make sure that whatever is being sent, as a response from the SCIM as UID, it has to be the same in the SAML. This is why.
Yeah. So I think this is like a known. It's not a bug or a feature or anything like that. I think it's just a known situation. I think, but I was more curious about what would happen if I haven't tested it. What would happen if the external UID, so user already exists in GitLab, they've got a SAML identity, and then we trigger SCIM does an API call to add, the SCIM identity to that existing user. But the user's identity is different. The SCIM identity is different from the existing SAML identity. So what happens then is kind of like think it would fail. Maybe
What will fail?
I said I think maybe it would fail. Like the SCIM would not be able to link it because it would find that the users. Smriti, can you show us
That's what
when
I'm.
in the code when the
Yeah.
SCIM identity is being linked to an existing user?
Mm-hmm.
Does it do like a? How does it find that user?
Yes, so it tries to find a SCIM identity with the external UID or the UID that has been sent as the response from the SCIM. Just a second. Say please. Then if we don't get it, we simply go ahead and build a new SCIM identity with the external UID and the user. So it tries to find the SCIM identity only with the UID that has been passed from the SCIM end or provider end. So in case the UID does not match, it just simply goes in and creates a new SCIM identity for that user.
But how does it find the user? The SCIM API endpoint doesn't. Wait, does it pull the user? Hold on.
It just send the email, right? If we have a user by email, existing user, then that user is linked. Otherwise, we go ahead and create a new user. Does that make sense? Is it okay? Because during the provisioning system, at least the email we get.
So
But-
so if that user already has a SCIM identity, hang on, and that SCIM identity can't be found. No, I'm confusing myself. I'll confuse everybody else. Hang on, I'll go back on mute.
No, but that's actually good.
Oh, Chris has linked. Okay. Chris has linked to that section in the doc. If you look at the Zoom chat.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yes. So this. Okay, so we do have this documentation. Okay. So the provider may create duplicate users. Okay. Okay, so what you're saying was basically right, Smriti. So SCIM will try to create a new user.
Yes.
Is that correct?
No, if the email, the user is
I don't-
already there.
It won't create a new user, right? Because even
We
though
don't.
the external UID is different,
Yeah.
the email will be the same, right? So it won't create a new user.
The new user will not be created, new identity will be created. We are only checking external UID while fetching the existing SCIM identity. We are not fetching the SCIM identity on the basis of the UID and the email. So if you already have a user with that email, we simply create a new SCIM identity. And I'm not very sure that how it will impact in future. Probably I'll have to test that scenario as Abu Bakr told.
Yeah, these identities once they can get pretty confusing. The SCIM and SAML identities and
Yeah, ideally we cannot have two users in the system with one email, so it's kind of not possible. But we will test this whole cycle, and maybe I'll share the observations with everybody in the call. And I'll also try and include it in the test cases. I think this is a very valid scenario. Okay,
This is
yeah,
where you get the email address already exists error, right?
yeah.
but that wouldn't show up because this is SCIM provisioning, right? So it might show up in the SCIM logs though, I guess.
Yes.
But it won't show up on GitLab logs, right?
It will not show up, but it will not happen. I mean, in case a user is already present in the system, he will simply go ahead and create a new SCIM identity. Or if the SCIM identity is already there by any chance, it will link that to the existing user. So I am not sure in what cases we will get this error that the user. It will be, but yeah, in case of there is some error in the SCIM provisioning, then we get to see the errors in the IDP logs. mostly,
Right.
not in the GitLab logs. Okay, so we'll just check.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We will simply glance through the SAML configuration ones, even though I actually talked about it already. So these are two extra attributes which I wanted to talk about. Allow single sign-on, that I have shown that if this attribute has been set at the GitLab end, then we have an option to create a new user by the in case the user does not exist on GitLab during the SSO process. If this attribute is not set, then we show the error to the user that the user account must exist on the GitLab before they try to log in as an SSO. Another one is auto link SAML user. So in case the user already exists on the GitLab, actually I'm not very clear about this one. Yeah, so in case this attribute is already being set at the GitLab end of AutoLink SAML user, then if we find a user by email in the GitLab end, then that person is linked to the SAML identity. So if this is false, then we don't auto-link the user. We try to create a new user. So these two are kind of complementary attributes. So these are the few attributes I wanted to cover. We just there were few common support queries and answers that I picked up from the Slack channel. I just wanted to go through them once so that we can understand that exactly what kind of queries we are in getting on day-to-day basis. So SAML group sync, okay. I don't think we have time to talk about SAML group sync, and in itself is a quite a wide topic, but I see we get a lot of queries on SAML group sync. So we should have another session for this. We will request, we will definitely have it as a part of our knowledge sharing. So they want to bypass user email confirmation with verified domains. Better to say they want to create SAML without the user receiving an email and needing to verify their account. The account just be provisioned and active without any user interaction. So yes, we do not verify or we do not confirm the users that are created via LDAP or SAML. They are automatically confirmed. I've also put this code snippet here to understand that we are for in our case the skip confirmation is always true when we are trying to build a new user in case of SAML or LDAP. GitLab, just a second, GitLab with SSO integration, they were wondering if mm, they were wondering if there is a group sync including role sync. From what I could find, group sync is no problem. However, I was wondering about role sync. So this is nothing. We have a very good documentation on configuring the SAML group links. For self-managed, is there always a local account created per SAML user? Yes, any user who signs up via SAML, a local account will always be created, irrespective of any other any exceptions. So if this attribute is set on the GitLab end of OmniAuth external providers, and then by default, those users will be marked as external. The users who use trying to use the OmniAuth method to sign into the GitLab, they will be marked as external. This is another setting that we got a query about in some days back. I think I will just simply put the link to the documentation in the notes because this is something which is also very interesting. So there is a code snippet here to yes. So if we have something called external provider, if you check, yeah. So if we have our provider, SAML provider added as an external provider in our config, then by default we will mark the user as external. So if sometime we can, this is also some setting that we need to be aware about, that we can by default mark a user as external if he has signed in via SAML provider that has been added to the configuration. So this is these are some extra attributes I wanted to talk about. And so over to you guys. Any other questions?
I think it's really useful having the links to the code in there. Whilst we can usually track it down, but having a quick reference to understand which parts of the code are responsible for those specific activities is really useful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Actually, it's easier for the, I think, I totally agree with you. Thank you. So I think we're already over time. If there are no more queries, then probably we can wrap up this session. Or if there are any other queries, please add it to the doc, and we will take care of those async. How about that?
That's great. Thank you, Smriti.
Thank you, Chris.
Really useful.
Thanks so much. Thanks for attending the session, and thank you, Abu Bakr. Thank you everybody for attending the session. Looking forward to more such knowledge sharing sessions. And honestly, I am very happy the way it went and how we could help each other understanding the topic better. Have a good day.